Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is my contribution to the GPU June 2 initiative being set up by Nathan over at the Pixel Pipes channel. It's an opportunity for tech YouTubers to come together and share stories of GPUs that are important to them throughout the month of June. Now, that's been a bit of a problem for me because originally I was going to do a video on this. This is a 3D Profit 4000 XT. It's a Cairo-based card made by Hercules that a friend of mine picked up in a charity shop about a year and a half ago. And it sat in its box, seemed completely happy, never been used, and it does seem to work up until the point you actually try to get it to do some 3D acceleration, at which point it goes completely crazy. Now, I've tried a variety of different hardware with this, and unfortunately I've exhausted the parts that I have time and access to get this video done in time for the deadline. So what I'm actually going to do in place of using this card is actually share with you another video that I'd already completed and intended to share at a later date. So for that reason, there are no more references throughout this video to GPU June 2. But in any case, I'll hope you enjoy it as much as you enjoy the videos from the other collaborators, and I'll see you again soon. Let's check this out.
Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to take a look at an absolute monster of a PC, this Dell Precision 690 from 2007. Just look at the size of this. For comparison, here's a Dell Dimension PC from a couple of years before this machine was built. The difference in size is just laughable. It's almost incredible, really. This is a PC that was given to me by a friend who I was visiting to collect some other equipment from. It had been sat outside in the rain for quite a while, but it looks to be perfectly dry now, so let's see if we can get it working. Before that though, let's take a look around. The front panel has 4 external 5¼ inch bays at the top, with the bottom one being able to receive a 3¼ inch drive as well. The top bay includes a DVD-ROM/CD rewritable drive. Beneath that, you've got some front panel I/O, which actually back in 2007 was still a really new feature. And I'm quite happy to see it here on what would have generally been used as a content creation or graphics design type of machine. Beneath that is this bowed out front panel which allows plenty of airflow to the internals, and emblazoned on the front are stickers for the Windows XP operating system and the Intel Xeon processor. I find it interesting that there's no mention of Windows Vista on the XP sticker. Around this time, Microsoft were almost insisting that compatible devices display the Windows Vista capable version of the XP sticker, but not here. Moving around to the side, we've got some clear evidence of that water damage, but other than that, there's just a couple of scratches on an otherwise gargantuan sheet of pressed steel. Round to the back, we've got the telltale signs of a bespoke internal layout. ATX this definitely is not. I think it might be based off of the short-lived BTX standard, so I'll be interested to see how things are laid out when we get inside. In terms of I/O, we've got a decent array of what are now legacy connection standards, including PS2, parallel, serial and FireWire connectors. There's also this expansion card up here which looks to provide Molex power and SATA data ports to the rear of the machine. I'm guessing to easily plug in internal hard disks for quick data migration without using a USB 2.0 interface. One thing we're not short of though is ventilation. Pretty much the entire rear panel, with the exception of the expansion card area, is a very wide mesh which will give excellent airflow, but also might suggest a higher level of dust inside than we might like. We'll have to wait and see. Moving to the top of the case, we've got the Windows XP license key at the back and the Dell service tag at the front. The nice thing about these service tags is that even now, 15 years later, I can look up the tag details on Dell's website and get a glimpse of this machine's factory configuration. says it looks like Dell have migrated their database a few times in the years past, because there's a lot of information here which at first glance looks to be gibberish. You can pick out some useful information though, like that this machine originally shipped with a 3rd generation Intel 5130 Xeon processor, and that it had 4GB of DDR2 RAM split across 4 1GB sticks. Or that it had a dual Nvidia Quadro graphics cards, which if you cross-reference the part number on eBay, you can see that each are 128MB units, and surprisingly cheap to replace, which is important because you may have noticed when we looked at the back, there are no graphics cards in this machine. We could sit and hypothesize about what's inside this machine all day though, so let's just crack it open and see what we've got going on. Well, that's certainly pretty busy inside. Up the top here, we've got the power supply, which kicks out a whopping 1000 watts. I know that's not exactly terrifying these days, but in 2007, that would have been a phenomenal power draw. Underneath that, there's space for up to 4 3.5-inch SATA hard disks via these blue drive sleds, one of which contains a 500GB Western Digital blue drive. It looks like one of the sleds is missing, but we've still got 3 bays to work with, and all the SATA cables are loomed in and ready to go. Towards the front, we've got the back side of that optical drive, and surprisingly, it's an IDE drive. I didn't even know that they made combi drives like this with an IDE connector, but even knowing that they do, I'm still confused. This board has SATA connectors aplenty and SATA hard disk installed, so why not a SATA optical drive? I mean, there are a total of 7 SATA ports, 4 for the built-in RAID controller and a further 3 for other devices, so why wouldn't you? It's weird. Beneath that, there's also a floppy ribbon cable for anyone that wanted a floppy drive. In 2007. On a high-end workstation. Yeah, let's not bother fitting one. The middle section of the chassis is reserved for expansion cards, and we've got a couple of PCI X slots, along with a PCI Express 8X slot at the very top. You've then got this additional add-on board, which gives you a pair of PCI Express 16X slots with double spacing to allow for dual height cards. All of the expansion slots use these toolless clip devices to retain your cards, and at the far end of the slots you've got these guides to help you slide the card in and to provide additional support for heavy cards. It's a really well engineered solution, and I'd imagined it would make this machine pretty solid overall. Not to mention it would line Dell's pockets with a markup on every card with the proprietary bracket included. That said, I'm maybe being a little unfair. There's nothing to stop you adding any card you like to this machine, providing it has the appropriate connector on the bottom. But I wonder how many people paid over the odds for Dell-specific cards for their machines. On the other side of that guide plate, you've got a 120mm fan designed to cool just the expansion cards. It's a pretty well thought out design, and in keeping with the BTX standard which prioritised good airflow. Beneath that you've got this shrouded area. A couple of knurled screws hold it on, and underneath you've got the memory riser and CPUs. Wait, CPUs? Plural? Our service tag told us we only had a single Xeon processor installed. What gives? I find it really hard to believe that Dell would waste money shipping a CPU cooler if there wasn't a CPU underneath. But I'm also not about to start stripping this machine down before I know if it works, so I guess we'll find out later. Next to that you've got the memory riser, and you can see a total of 16 DDR2 slots. Part of me just wants to go and buy a whole bunch of DDR2 sticks just to see this fully populated rather than the paltry offering of 4 sticks that we currently have. To the front of this section is another cooling fan, this time a 160mm unit, which will throw immense amounts of air over the CPU and memory before this 120mm unit at the back sucks it all back out. Overall, it's a really well thought out design, and I'm sure it's going to do an excellent job of keeping everything cool, though from the looks of it, not necessarily quiet. Anyway, it's all looking pretty good in there. It just needs a quick blow with the air duster before I look at powering it on. Filth. With that done, I'm going to need a GPU, and rather than try to source the original Quadro cards this thing came with, I think it's time to hit eBay and see if we can find something more interesting to play with. This is the NVIDIA 8800 GTX. Released at the end of 2006 and at the time a formidable beast. This card broke the mould of what a GPU should be and was one of the biggest generational leaps that had ever been seen in the market. The G80 GPU core at the centre of this card broke all records for the number of transistors on a GPU die, coming in with 681 million of the blighters on 480 square millimeters of silicon. It also came with 768 megabytes of dedicated graphics memory, and in fact later cards in the range would be the first to break the 1 GB barrier. My EVGA 8800 GT came with 1 GB of memory, and I kept that thing for 7 years. It was just breathtaking at the time, and it still at least looked pretty impressive in 2022 if it weren't for the fact that it only has 2 DVI ports and an S-Video connector on the back. This particular card is from a Dell XPS machine and features the same guide bracket design as used in the Precision line, so it should slot straight in with no issues. Nice. So with that installed and the machine quickly reassembled, it's time to see if this machine actually works, or whether I've just wasted 30 quid on a card I can't use. Fingers crossed. Well, that's a relief. We at least power on, and dropping into the BIOS we can see that there are actually 2 Xeon 5130 CPUs installed, each clocked at 2 GHz and with 2 cores on each, giving us 4 cores and 8 megabytes of cache total. Back in 2007, this would have been a huge amount of processing power. I assume then this must have been a high-end workstation for someone when it was originally purchased. Looking at the RAM, it appears that only 2 GB is recognised, though weirdly, further down the page it acknowledges 4 separate sticks of DDR2 ECC RAM, each 1 GB in size. It's a bit weird, but frankly I'm a bit out of my depth when it comes to higher end ECC types of RAM, so I've got no idea if it's supposed to only read 2 GB or if something untoward is going on. Dropping back out of the BIOS, it seems that we have a problem with booting into Windows. It looks like that missing sled may have contained a second drive, which was part of a RAID array with the remaining one, so we're not going to be able to do anything with that data stored in the remaining disk. Instead, I'm going to add this second Western Digital Blue disk and create a new array. This drive is only 320 GB versus the 500 on the existing drive, but this isn't a problem for RAID arrays. It just means we'll only be able to use 320 GB of the larger 500 GB drive, as the RAID array needs the partitions on either drive to be the same size. The built-in utility isn't the easiest to navigate, but after a while I had a working array and was then able to go ahead and install Windows XP. I've gone with the 32-bit version, which is a bit wasteful given it won't be using our 64-bit capable Xeons to their full potential, but anyone that remembers the 64-bit version of Windows XP will know that driver support and general software compatibility was an absolute minefield, with many companies not getting it right until Windows Vista was already mainstream and 7 was well on the way. That said, this version is still really snappy. And I guess it's time for us to answer the question that everyone has been asking in their minds ever since I said 8800 GTX. Can it run Crysis? Of course it f***ing can. And by the way, can we just talk a moment about how good Crysis still looks in 2022? It's a game that came out 15 years ago. It has no right to look this good still. The rasterized lighting in particular is still fantastic when compared to even modern games. It's just mind-blowing. At 1440 by 900 on this widescreen display, the 8800 has no problems returning playable frame rates on high settings. Why not ultra high? Well, that setting was essentially reserved for DirectX 10 features, which this card will support, but only if you're running Windows Vista or later, so we're out of luck. That said, this card makes mincemeat of other games from this time frame, and even Batman Arkham Asylum looks fantastic and runs more or less at a smooth 60 frames per second, and that was released 4 years later in 2011. Because we're running Windows XP though, we're also able to play much earlier games based on DirectX 9 and earlier with no problems at all, although at that point it's a bit like smashing a walnut with a sledgehammer. My point is, this machine is, I would argue, the ultimate Windows XP era gaming PC, capable of playing games from the late 90s all the way through to around 2013, which, to put it in perspective, is when Grand Theft Auto 5 came out. Not only that, but you can just see the effort that Dell has put into designing this thing. You can swap out expansion cards, hard disks, optical drives, and even the fans without so much as a screwdriver, and in mere seconds to boot. Clearly, this machine was designed for environments where time literally is money, and if the users weren't working, then the business was losing money. It is frankly a ridiculously over-engineered machine for my use case, but if it's a choice between landfill or a space heater in my office in winter, then I know which I prefer. And I'm pleased to add it to my collection where it'll fill a pretty exhaustive gap in gaming history. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave a like and consider subscribing to see more videos like this. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.